Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hump Day edition of The Rundown. I will be your host today, Craig DeLuz, coming at you from the West Coast, the left coast, behind the Iron Curtain, otherwise known as the Sierras. And once again, my name would be Craig DeLuz. But as we all know, I do not do this program by myself.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Hump Day edition. My name is Mike P. Waworski. I am your co-host for today, the co-host from the East Coast. That's the right coast, the coast with the most, where we bring you 2A news and conservative views here on the Hump Day edition of The Rundown.
Uh-oh. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Uh-oh. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
It's Hump Day.
Hump Day!
Mike. Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is?
Here it is. Love it.
That's right. It's Hump Day. This is the day where we attempt on a regular basis to begin the weekend as early as possible.
Yes, and my weekend began last Wednesday. Just kind of rolling it through, making it 2.5 weeks a weekend.
Exactly. You know, it's amazing. I have found that this is the hardest time of the year to try and get anything done between Christmas and New Year. December's always hard. As a matter of fact, December all the way through kind of MLK Day is hard to get anything work-related done. But especially this week between Christmas and New Year's.
This is the best catch-up week for me. This is the week where you can sit down at work and do everything you want to do without being bothered because nobody's calling you with the normal everyday nonsense of work. So I love working holidays because it's the day to get caught up on work and not have to deal with, I don't know, stuff like bosses and things like that. So
yeah, well, I spend a lot of this time just kind of preparing, planning, and getting things set up for the upcoming year. Okay, these are the things that I want to get done. These are the things that I really want to kind of focus on in areas where I want to grow. So it does wind up being productive internally from a business, but externally trying to reach people and trying to plan stuff and get stuff from people is the pain in the patootie.
Good stuff. Nope, I understand. You know, and it is a good week though. I enjoy it, and I like it. I understand exactly what you're saying. So we'll drive on. Oh, hey, Craig. You know, I did. I mean, I've known this for a little bit, but I think it's time to let the viewers in and let the folks know that some new information's come up in case they happen to be watching closely and taking a look. Folks, it seems that when I start doing this stuff on the program, that it really freaks out Craig. He doesn't know what's going on. It's just,
He starts looking confused. I'm like, you all right, Mike? Is everything okay? Are you being invaded? Is ATF there? What's going on?
Yeah, see, and it's good with me. It's just that there's those tiny moments every once in a while where you stumble, and they're very few and far between. But then I like to compound that by doing this to confuse you, and then you really start to. I could see you swerve while you're talking. You can literally see you take a swerve in your conversation and try and bring it back on the road.
I'm like, okay,
that's fun for me. I figured I'd share it with everybody.
Yeah, it's really, really hard trying to think and talk at the same time. When your thoughts are like ahead of what, and it's kind of like driving off the road. Like you're looking, yeah, not a good thing.
You could end up like Kamala Harris talking about democracy being the threat instead of an autocracy. She just stayed off the road though. She just kept driving down the dirt road.
She did, down the hill off the dirt road.
Yeah.
Well,
right off the cliff.
Okay, and I guess that leads us to our first story because that's exactly what I believe the president did actually quite recently. For those of you who've been paying attention, President Biden has come out and said, well, first of all, let's go back to during the campaign. Then candidate Biden made it very, very clear that he was going to be, what's the word I'm looking for? That he was going to take over, and we needed a federal solution. We needed someone who's going to develop a federal plan to deal with the coronavirus, and that he was the man with the plan.
We need a president who's going to bring us together, not pull us apart. I'll put in place a plan to deal with this pandemic responsibly. I've already done it. I've said it before. I'm not going to shut down the economy. I'm not going to shut down the country, but I'm going to shut down the virus.
All right, so he said he had a plan. Matter of fact, he already put together the plan. But then just the other day, he came out and said, well, the very opposite.
Look, there is no federal solution. This gets solved at a state level, and it ultimately gets down to where the rubber meets the road.
All right, now, Mike, is it just me, or did he say the exact opposite a year later?
Listen, he said the exact opposite of the exact opposite of the exact opposite that he said. So he's even gone another step before, which you just you gave us the video documentation on. If you recall, when the nation was first faced with the aspect of a lockdown. By the way, Craig, we're in week 96 of the 2-week lockdown, just in case anybody's keeping track. When the Democrats and Congress and all the candidates were jumping up and down on President Trump. Remember, he had just come off one of the most successful State of the Union addresses we'd seen in a very long time. And they had to have something. So they lock onto this COVID. And it was President Trump that said, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this. And the Dems pushed and pushed and pushed. Remember, that was their campaign thing. You're going to let us die for medical reasons. And then they finally came to a compromise, came with the 2 weeks, and that's all the Dems needed. Remember, then from that point, they just continued to drive it down and try to drive down the country to hopefully win that election. So the Democrats forced it, right? And then towards the election, as the nation is suffering, they come back and say, "Would you just put Joe Biden on there? He would never do this. He would never do this." He was the one that said to do it in the first place. They were the ones that said President Trump was doing nothing and they had to do something. So when President Trump started to do a little bit of what they asked for under the medical aspects, then they turn on him. Well, guess what? Now they're turning again. We're on the third flip-flop now, according to what I've got. You just showed video evidence of 2, but we're on we're at a minimum of the third flip-flop with these guys.
There's tons of flip-flops. There's the vaccine, where you had at one point he was saying we shouldn't be politicizing the vaccine. And yet you had his vice president say that, well, she wouldn't take it if it came out of a Trump administration. And then she turned around and took it, right? They had her on TV getting jabbed.
I hear she takes it a lot, though, actually.
Okay, well, I'm not going there. The thing is the fact that most of the mainstream media will not hold this guy accountable is beyond incredulous. It is frustrating because he is saying the exact opposite. I mean, this is exactly what Trump said. He was saying that, look, people in local communities and local locales know best how to address the situation from where they are. We don't need a one-size-fits-all solution. And here he is. Now Biden is saying the exact same thing. How about this? How about this, President Biden? How about you admit you were wrong?
Yeah, I got asked this yesterday. I was doing another show and guested on there, and it's odd. It was the same question, really. And I said, listen, the American people is going to give this guy a bye for a couple of reasons. One, because they realize right now that President Trump was right on most all of this stuff, and they're scratching their heads. And rather than be secure and be medically sound and have everything that they need to sustain themselves, they would rather live with the lie that Biden is correct than admit that Trump was. So that's number one. They don't want to go back on that. Number two is that I think they really are starting to understand that Joe Biden might be the guy saying these things, but he's not the guy writing these things. It's not his policies. It's not everything else. How can you hold an old man that's senile responsible for these items when you know it's not him? And listen, I'm not saying there's a deep state conspiracy. The Chinese are running the country or anything like that. I'm saying those people around him are finding every lucid moment they can out of him to get him to go up there and spout the policy they want.
Right. Oh, that's it 100%. That is it 100%. And it's time, by the way, that we admitted that. It's time that the people who voted for him admitted that, and admitted that they knew, or at least they suspected, that was what it was going to be all along. Now, there are a lot of people who didn't think that was going to be the case, and had they known, probably wouldn't have voted for him, and we probably have a very different outcome to the election.
But none of which that are willing to go back and say that, because then it would have to admit they were wrong, and it would lend credence to President Trump saying, "I'm going to return for his president."
I think if you look at the polls, what the polls are showing now is that there are people out there. They're not politicos. They're not people who are in the media or people who are in the political world, but there are rank and file citizens who are admitting buyer's remorse. And I think that's what the polls are showing us.
Yeah, and nobody's saying anything publicly, and then again, we know how accurate a poll can be in today's mainstream media. So, yes, there might be some trending items in polls, but how accurate they are,
Well,
I think the media could frame them the way
I
they
think
want.
the fact that even Democrats are talking about who are their hopefuls for 2024, and Biden is not among them, even though he's the leading candidate,
Right.
tells you something.
It would be the first time in a very, very long time that a different nominee than the sitting president in his first term was the candidate that was being pushed. And I don't think people are worried about it because I don't think Joe's even aware that that they're having the conversation about him. I mean, I honestly believe it's tapioca pudding and what are we doing today?
Yeah, pretty much. Probably sounds pretty close to exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah.
All right, moving right along to our next story. Now, you guys remember when then McDuffie was running for governor in the state of Virginia, and he made the comment that parents should not have a say in their children's education. They should have a say in what is taught in school. Well, that actually turned out to spark a revolution, in my opinion. That's what I'll call it. There in the state of Virginia, a state that had been trending blue for the longest time. Now all of a sudden, you had Republicans took over both houses of the state house of the legislature, and won the governorship over a guy who was governor before, who was a darling of the Democratic Party. All because he said, once again, that parents should have no place in what's taught in schools. Well, turns out that there's someone else who's got some stuff that whose opinion that is, and none other than Nicole Hannah-Jones, who is the creator of the 1619 Project. That's the group that actually has sought to rewrite history and say that the nation's founding began in 1619. Well, she is saying aloud what most people on the left, other than obviously Terry McDuffie. Anyway, other than what he would, other than him, she's espousing the same exact stuff. Check it out.
I don't really understand this idea that parents should decide what's being taught. I'm not a professional educator. I don't have a degree in social studies or science. We send our children to school because we want them to be taught by people who have expertise in the subject area. And that is not my job. When the governor or the candidate said that he didn't think parents should be deciding what's being taught in school, he was panned for that. But that's just the fact. This is why we send our children to school and don't homeschool, because these are the professional educators who have the expertise to teach social studies, to teach history, to teach science, to teach literature. And I think we should leave that to the educators. Yes,
Okay, first I'll start off with the fact that I thought she was a professional teacher. I thought she was an educator. I mean, she was panned for not being offered certain jobs at certain higher institutions of higher learning. I thought she was a professional, a quote unquote expert. But here's what we know, Mike. The truth is that education of our children is first and foremost the responsibility of us, the parents. And we delegate that responsibility to educators. We don't give up our rights and we don't give up our responsibility. There's also a reason why we elect school board members to make sure that kids are learning what it is we believe as a society is important to them. So whatever this lady is saying, no, parents should be involved in what's being taught in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, when the when the former governor said it there, he was pandering to the minority crowd, trying to lock in the Democrat vote because that's what they had been told they wanted. The Democrats had been told they wanted it. Their candidates had repeatedly told them they wanted it because that was separating them from Trump. Anything that they could find to find a policy that was anti-Trump is what they were spouting. And they realized at some point after the election that they went a little too far. This woman here, Craig, Nicole Hannah-Jones, She, on the other hand, is purely a racist. Listen, well, how can a black woman be racist? She's absolutely 100% a racist. She wants separation of white and black people. She wants black people to have everything given to them. She wants all of her she wants reparations without asking for it. She wants 250 years, 245 years of oppression repaid to her, and just her, nobody else. She wants you to go to school and be taught that black people have been oppressed and black people are owed everything, and that we should bow down over backwards to give them what they want, or what she wants them to have. She's a racist, and she's stirring racial disharmony and separation. She's a woman that should be looked at for treason and sedition, the way she's trying to divide our children right now, not just the adults.
I agree. The one correction is she doesn't necessarily, whether or not black people have been oppressed is not in question. They were. But she acts as if we're dealing with the same level of oppression and racism and discrimination today as we were since the first slave walked off the boat. And that's just not true. It's not even close. I like to say, or I've said more than once, if the discrimination my father, who was a World War II veteran, dealt with, if that was a roadblock, what we deal with today is a speed bump. And that's just being honest. The point is that we have transformed this nation, and there is no nation that has a greater level of opportunity for all people, no matter your socioeconomic status, no matter your race, no matter your gender. There is no place that is freer than these United States. There's a reason why over 70% of all millionaires became millionaires, or are first generation millionaires who've earned what they have. They didn't inherit it; they earned it. And that's something that's vitally important that I think she completely and utterly ignores. And by the way, her whole point on homeschooling, let's just be real. Look, test scores amongst the homeschooled are way higher in just about every aspect than it is for those who attend traditional public schools. And I'm a public school advocate. I sit on a school board, so I'm not anti-public school. But to say that parents have no say, in fact, the more involved parents are in their children's education and what their children are learning, the better their children do.
Yeah, and listen, and there's benefits to homeschool. We know that, right?
Right.
You get the attentiveness, and sometimes, most of the time, you get the attentiveness. But ask a homeschool kid to throw a football or cross the street by himself and see what happens most of the time. Guess what? You got to go out in life after you graduate high school and college. You don't even have to say hi to the person standing next to you. That's the problem with homeschool kids.
Well, but homeschooling today is not what it used to be, because now, especially with the advent of the internet, you have the ability to create opportunities for sports, for arts, for theater, for those sorts of social interactions. It's a little different than it used to be.
Now you get to sit on a screen in Zoom and ignore somebody instead of sitting in the classroom and ignoring them. Yeah, that's the difference.
No, I mean, first of all, I know people who homeschool, who play high school sports, play football, basketball. Right. By the way, if you live in a particular area, then you can go and play on those teams and participate in the extracurricular activities at those schools. Once again, my point though is that she's trying to say that there's a reason why we don't homeschool, because we're not experts. And my thing is, when it comes to the educational aspect of it, there are a lot of people who are homeschooling who are better than the quote unquote experts.
The people that are homeschooled are better than the experts.
The people who are doing the homeschooling are better than the quote unquote public school experts.
Okay, I didn't hear that word. Okay, yeah, got you. No, agreed with you there. Agreed. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying about homeschooling to a certain degree, but my point is that she's trying to act like parents have no say, or should have no say, in what's being taught to their children. And my thing is that they definitely should have a say, because it's their primary responsibility.
Well, and here's the problem: because they not only should they have a say, they should be the ones that elect the officials that determine the courses that are taught, and that's that's direct representation. And you don't get much closer to direct representation than you do in your school board and in your local mayor's election. That's it. That's direct representation.
Right.
And if that doesn't happen, you throw them out. When she comes in here and says things like, "I don't care what the parents say," she should no longer be part of the school administration whatsoever.
No, not at all. Absolutely, positively not at all. Okay, moving right along to our next story. Speaking about having a say in education, California has had an interesting story. So about a month ago, we found out that there was a high-ranking official in the Department of Education, our person who's supposed to be like over equity and inclusion. Come to find out, he didn't live in the state of California. Well, now we're finding out that there is a second individual who works in the Department of Education, who, by the way, does not live in the state of California. Her name is Pamela Kadakia. She lives in Dallas. She lives in Dallas. Okay.
What part of California is that?
Well, it's no part of California. It's where a lot of Californians are moving, I guess. But it is not a part of California. But she's lived in she's lived in Dallas and serving as the equity project manager. So here's what's so funny, man. In both cases, you have the person who doesn't live in the state of California work in equity and inclusion. It's like, so what is it about equity? If you want to work in equity and inclusion and you want to be inclusive, why are you not living in the state of California, supposedly the most racially diverse state in the union?
Listen, this is obviously ridiculous. That you have people that work for the state, they work for the Department of Education, and here's the ridiculous part: that they're lying to the people of the state of California, that they're lying to the constituents that elect the people, that appoint these people. That they have decided to be deceitful is the ridiculous part. All right, they know they're breaking the rules, and they know they're trying to get away with something they shouldn't be getting away with. That's the ridiculous part. Now, Greg, having said that, and I'm not trying to defend these two in either way, we've all learned over the past 2 years that this nation could probably live in Alaska and work in Miami at the same time if you've got a Zoom. The same way we just talked about homeschooling in front of a computer, many employers found out that they could have their employees work wherever they wanted to around the country as long as they had a camera and some internet access. Now, I think those two people in those jobs probably would have been able to do that. But as long as the state's rules are, you must be a resident and live in this state to be a state employee, that's what you're doing. If not, you're thieving. You're stealing money from the government and the money from the people in California.
Keep in mind, these are political appointees.
Yes.
So imagine a political appointee for the United States not living in the United States. I mean, other than like an ambassador.
Well, and see that a lot
or
of
not
times
being being a citizen of the United States. How about that?
Yeah. Well, we get that too. So yeah, we had a president like that for 8 years.
Once again, it goes beyond me because, and what's funny is these folks are these folks who are living in other states, dude, you're telling me that there's not a place here in the state of California. And by the way, they're hiring these folks and like she gets $10,000 a month. She earns $10,000 a month. That's over $120,000 a year that she earns working out of state. And you know what? Let me tell you something. The reason why she's in the state of Texas is because it's more affordable. How about that? I mean, isn't that saying something when your political appointees, this is a political appointee, is living in another state because it's more affordable? Just like a lot of our retired state employees, guess what? They move out of the state of California. They move to Nevada, they move to Arizona, they move to Oregon. Why? Because it's more affordable. That ought to be saying something to the Newsom administration about, their ideas of the affordability of California.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Yeah, it's just your own ruling class can't even rule from their own castle. They got to go find a cheaper castle somewhere else. Castle. You trying to pay a castle payment here in California? It's crazy.
Okay.
Greg, we did talk about we were talking about politicians yesterday, just talking about the state residency requirement. I did look up yesterday a little follow up where in Florida, if you want to be an elected official, you have to be, and it starts at the state level. The counties have some different rules, but at a minimum at the state level, if you want to be a state representative or a state senator, you have to live, you have to reside, not just own property.
Right.
You must reside in the district that you are representing him, and you must have resided in that district for a minimum of 2 years prior to the election. So
in California, it's the same exact thing, except it's 1 year. So you have to have resided in the area at least a year. But what we were talking about, though, at the congressional level,
it's the same here for Florida. Yes, same requirement. Florida has put that on the federal representatives as well.
Yeah, and in California, you do not. As long as you live in the state, you can represent a district.
Yeah, that's
odd, incredibly odd.
Yeah.
What's funny is, so the district that I live in, I don't have a state. I don't have a representative in the new lines that have been drawn, but they drew the lines where they put three members of Congress in the same exact district.
Right.
And so now they're all announcing, I'm running for that district over there.
Right.
Oh, hilarious, hilarious. All right, final story for the day has to do with New York. New York City, get a rope. Turns out that in New York, now we all know that, New York is about as anti-gun as they come, or at least in terms of the politicians.
Yeah.
But New York is actually on pace to record the second highest level of gun sales ever for New York. They are on track, and that's, by the way, those are based on the numbers from without even including December, right? They're basically saying that they are going to break all sorts of records when it comes to gun sales there in New York. I just find that interesting because you had de Blasio, who was the mayor there. You had Cuomo, who was the governor, and both of them were, first of all, are completely and utterly anti-Second Amendment. We're passing laws right and left, making it difficult to purchase a gun. I just find interesting the fact, especially when you consider the fact that you actually have to file for a permit to even own a firearm in New York.
Yeah, and depending on where you are, remember if you're in the city or if you're down on Long Island, that it's not just a permit to buy a gun; it's a permit to go look at a gun and touch a gun before you decide what you want to buy. Then you have to get another permit to purchase the gun. Then you have to get a home permit to take the gun home with you. So I mean, it's a minimum of a 3 permit process just to get the gun out of the gun store. Yeah, and then that's like we said, that's all down in the southeast there. That's in the city. You've got a little bit of that going on now in Westchester County. Long Island is fighting that as well. They're trying their darndest to be separated from the city. But this is all going on upstate New York. This goes on in the other 55 counties in upstate New York, where it is God's country, and these are country folks and rednecks and city people, but they have nothing to do with the politics of down city and down island. So that gun sales up there is going crazy. Now they've got to pay by the same rules, right? No standard capacity magazines, no assault weapons, whatever those are. So they're buying the heck out of some revolvers, 10-shot autos, and shotguns. That's what's going on in upstate New York. They're getting ready to be their own force to be reckoned with in case the city tries to enact some tyranny up north.
Yeah, it's here's the thing, and I really just believe that what we're starting to see now is what I'm hoping we're seeing is a transformation where people are starting to realize that, relying on government is not to defend us, to protect us, to provide for us, is not the wisest course of action because, they can't take care of themselves, let alone the rest of us.
Listen, I'll tell you what, and this is where gun control is doomed to failure, right? I always use this example. If the government came down right now and they said, just like they've said in a couple of states, right? No more gasoline engine cars. Done. We're never going to have a gas-powered car again. We're going to get rid of them all in this country, right? You know what, Greg? It's less. we're looking at somewhere about 400 million cars in this country, as opposed to close to a billion firearms. So we're talking about 1/3. But do you really think if you came down in this country and said, and the government said, we're getting rid of all gasoline powered cars, do you think they'd be able to do it? Do you think they'd be able to find it? Do you think they'd be able to
I will
take
tell
it
you
from
what,
people?
well, they're trying in California as of 2035.
I know.
Now, unless the law changes, which I could possibly see that happening, no new car sales will have fossil fuel. There will be no gas powered vehicles sold in the state of California, at least not new ones.
Sure.
So they're
and how
trying.
long do you think that will work? Do you really think that the government's going to be able to
I
go
don't
door
see,
to
I don't
door,
see how
find a
it works.
car,
I honestly don't
open
see
your
how it works.
garage, check your car, see what kind of gasoline it takes, or see what kind of energy it takes? There's no way they can't. You're talking about 4,000 or 5,000 pounds items that they're not going to be able to find all of them. You really think they could find my 45 that I keep in my pocket?
Right.
No, it's never going to happen. Never going to happen.
No. Well, what you're going to wind up having is the law will be enforced when it comes to firearms based on interactions with law enforcement. And studies have already shown that it will wind up dramatically impacting young Black and brown, Latino and African American men will be the number one people against whom these laws will be enforced. And then you will have the woke left stand up and say, no, this is a war. They'll basically call it, racism. Which, by the way, is one of the things that we've said. It's like, look, gun control is racist. It was originally created to keep those people, and you know who those people are, us people, from owning firearms.
And I hear you, and I agree with that portion. But
Right.
If we get to a point where it's police doing selective enforcement or doing enforcement of those people that they have interaction with,
Right.
Craig, at that point, the interaction will be with criminals. All right. I do not agree that the police go out and say, well, it's time to sweep guns up today. Let's talk to 80%.
Oh, no. I'm not saying it's intentional. I'm saying that they're going to go into the communities where there is more crime, and the communities where there tend to be more crime are urban inner cities, which happen to have a larger portion of ethnic minorities. I'm not saying that they're targeting people of color. I'm just saying that's how the numbers have come out, because that's where the crime is taking place.
Well, and here's an idea. Here's how you keep the police out of your community. You don't commit crimes.
Don't commit crime on each other. Good, excellent point.
That's all you go. Yeah.
Excellent point. All right, moving right along. Let's move along to our parting shot. We talked a little bit earlier about, Joe Biden, and we talked about his level of competence.
My butt's been wiped.
My butt's been wiped. The fact that he felt the need to point that out, I still don't know what he was originally saying.
Somebody asked him how his day was going. Somebody asked him how his day was going on the way to the helicopter. He was all smiling and he said, my butt's been wiped. That's what you do when you're senile. That's what you say. When the Thorazine isn't kicked in yet. That's what you say.
Okay. Well, this is basically his Build Back Better program in a nutshell. It says, what do you do? What did you do to the wheel? It was just fine. He's building it back better. And that's what he's doing to the country. Look, when Joe Biden took over as president, we had an economy that was on the comeback. We had unemployment that was going down. We had no inflation. We had record low gas prices. Things were going quite well when Joe Biden took over the presidency. And I don't know that there's been a greater or a faster decline of a situation, whether it's an economy or anything, than we have seen under Joe Biden. As fast? No, not at all.
Craig, I saw an article earlier this week that said the reason we have inflation, and it was the only time I've ever seen them say we had inflation, but the reason that we have inflation and the reason that we have the unemployment that we have now is because of President Trump's policies that created prosperity and employment. Because the flip side of prosperity and employment is inflation and unemployment. So this is the negative side effects of the positive things he did.
Well, the thing is that, and this is a big part of this. Well, it's twofold. Number one is the increasing in gas prices. When we cut off access to federal lands, when we cut off all of those leases, and we started reducing the amount of oil that we were producing domestically, That drove up fuel prices because now OPEC was in control of what gas prices were going to be because they became once again the number one producers of oil. And they basically said, yeah, no, we're going to keep prices high. That was one thing. The other thing was sending into the economy trillions of dollars, right? Trillions of dollars, whether people needed it or not, right? You put a lot of money into the economy, whether it was needed or not. And then you were paying people more to stay at home than they would earn if they went to work. So you had less production and people with more money. Less production means less product. Less product means decreased supply. More money in people's pocket means increased demand. Less supply, more demand. Guess what? You get prices going up, which is called inflation. And that's all Biden policies. All of that is Biden.
Sure, unless you listen to the media. And like I said, now it's Trump's fault. All that happened.
Right. Just basic economics.
Yep.
Anyway, speaking of economics, it's time to pay the bills.
Yep.
Tell the folks about our sponsors.
Let's do it. Our good friends at Guerrilla Machining, Grid Defense, and of course, the California Republican Assembly. All great friends. Please visit their websites. Let them know you heard from us here talking about them to you, and now you'd like to include them in your daily lives.
Exactly. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Tell your friends about The Rundown. It is the place to talk about 2A news and conservative views. Once again, I am your host, Craig DeLuz, saying bye-bye till Thirsty Thursday.
See you tomorrow.